Okay, back again, hopefully working this time. I am Jen Brazelli, and I'm here with.
I'm Kyle Godby. These are our field notes from the swamp, and we are joined by Tiani Jones today. So, welcome. I will hand you the mic
Yes.
to introduce yourself how you like.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I don't really know how to describe what I do or how to
Welcome to the
introduce
club.
myself most of the
Yep,
time. Yeah.
you're very welcome
Um,
here.
my back. Yeah, exactly. So, like, my background's in engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science, and I went to this school that originally started off as a mining engineering school, and then I specialized in electrical engineering and studied mechanical and civil as well, but then mostly worked in software, and have lived through all the different kinds of lived through it sounds so dramatic, different kinds of organizations, economic, tech bubbles and all the things, and which is giving me a lot of different kinds of work experiences. So using my like language skills to software testing to actually doing electrical engineering to actually doing some coding. And so because of that, I developed over time expertise in kind of like organizations and complexity and things like that, which I apply to helping solve problems in large organizations now. So that's kind of my intro as succinctly as I can, and kind of a different one than I've ever said before. So there you go.
Well, that's
They
exciting.
morph. Yeah.
I know it's different every
Uh,
time.
yeah, they meet the context, sort of. Or we're guessing anyway. It's a constant
Yeah.
probe, sense, respond. Awesome.
So
So,
I am.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
No. All you.
Well, I was just going to say, hopefully similar to what you were going to say. I'm just dying to hear right off the bat. Where does the whole point of these conversations is to talk about how things like complexity science, sense making, etc., show up in our actual day to day work.
Yeah.
And we both know you, so we know a little bit of that. But I would
Mhm.
love to just hear you talk about it, and in whatever form that makes sense to you.
Um, well, I can talk to you maybe how I got introduced to some of the, well, just understanding, heard the term complexity misapplied most of the time, and then one day I went to a conference and heard a talk, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Uh huh.
And so it was years ago, 2011 maybe. I went to a conference and I heard basically everyone that we have all been we three have all interfaced with. Like I think uh, Alicia Guerrero spoke. I think Cameron Tonkinway spoke. Jabe Bloom. So many different people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a thought worker that I met that was like really good at doing like lean, kind of like experimental product development. His name was Awei Chen. And these are people who I remembered their talks and their workshops, and I still
Mm-hmm.
recall their ideas. I don't know if Dave Snowden spoke at that one, but I was exposed to his some of his ideas. And at the time, I was working in an organization that was doing lots of app development and consulting. And I just noticed that we often were kind of like in the organization, there was like language or this kind of like certainty about what to do. And I was kind of like always saying, I don't know. And that seemed to like get me. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? You're supposed to know. Like, but I don't know it. We have to like try something, figure something out, like dig under every rock or like test. And that was just like, there was like feeling of tension there. And then once I
Mm-hmm.
heard these ideas about what it means to be in a complex, what does complexity mean when we talk about an organization, people with some kind of system boundary or systems,
Mm-hmm.
different boundaries, groupings. And as they get bigger, they're trying to do things. And what does that mean? What happens? What is emergence? You know, like what are the different forces at play, elements at play? What it means to have known unknowns and unknown unknown. Like, what does that actually mean? And that was kind of like a light bulb moment for me. And so that showed up in terms of what it meant to get a new client with this like brilliant idea they'd had, and they say, I think it's going to work and I'm going to make lots of money. And we're like, okay, great. How do we help them find out whether it will without them spending all of the money that they have to find out whether it will? That's one example. And then in terms of like organizational dynamics as well, power structures, power dynamics, narratives that you hear, and how that actually influences what people then do because they hear a prevailing narrative that's somehow grown. All those things are at play in an organization. And so when I first got exposed to that, then I started seeing it everywhere, obviously, and then wanting to dig deeper and read more, learn more, and try techniques that help disrupt the we have all the answers, but and a little bit more of that let's see how we can find out, or see how we can learn more. So how do we increase knowledge? How do we inject? What things can we do that will actions that can, more epistemic actions that can generate new knowledge, new insights that we can actually use in our next steps. So yeah, that's, for me, that was like the most powerful, and the thing that I sit with like almost daily are those kind of core elements and concepts around complexity.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I think we've talked so much about how there was something sort of intuitive that preceded finding the language and the methodologies. We were all sensitive to it, and then got introduced to something more refined. That the light bulb moment happened, and then the pivot, where you just couldn't unsee that sort of thing. So this is such an awesome trend. I'm wondering how that journey was, because I remember the instinct of, I finally heard it, I grabbed it, now I want to go run through the fields and like announce it, and all I got was the sort of like, stay away from us kind of response. Like, I don't know, we need data and dashboards and certainty. Like you're bombing your career here. How was your journey through this?
I think I overwhelmed everyone. So that conference, everyone's like, okay, we invested in it, a few of us to go to the conference. And I mean, I have my notebook still. It was just like so many notes. So, I mean, it was just everything. And so they're like, share what you learned. And I proceeded to create like a 1.5 hour talk that was like everything I learned from like the theory of everything. One of the designers helped me put the first cover slide together, and it was like a cow on a road or something, like Big Sky Open Road or something. And then I changed it to because it was a lean product development, lean Kanban, lean UX were kind of like some of the main topics that came up. It was at NYU. And so then I changed something kind of more like hip hop based, because that song "Lean With It, Rock With It" was like out at the time. So anyway, so I had, I tried to make it fun. It wasn't. I mean, people just were like, at the end, they were just like, it was like complete. They didn't even know what to ask me, because I went from everything from like product experiments to, oh, by the way, where does all this come from? Have you heard of Taylorism? That's not where it all comes from, but that was one of Taylorism. Yep. Frederick Winslow Taylor, and he invented the stopwatch and a shovel. And then I went into like Daniel Pink's like motivation, and then I went into like Nordstrom. Nordstrom, like they had this design sprint where they had this team go in a store and sit there in the accessories department by the sunglasses and develop this app that allowed you to kind of visualize yourself better than a mirror with different sunglasses. But they learned things about the aspect ratio and when things got blurry and what people needed, and how they held this tablet in the store on the counter with the salespeople. I mean, literally, it had video, everything in the kitchen sink about complexity woven into product development and lean. And I had some of the total production system stuff in there. And then I put the definitions of all the terms, like Mura, Muda, Mura, Muri, like the types of waste. And I was like, this is what that shows up in, how it shows up in software development. I literally went crazy, and it was an hour and a half time. And that's probably.
Do you still have this presentation? Do you still have the slides?
I do.
Dying to see it.
I do.
We
I do
need
have
do you
it.
have a recording of yourself presenting it? Because I
No,
mean, I wouldn't want you to go back and
someone
redo it,
might.
but I
Someone
just,
might. But I don't know if they. I could reach out to some folks and see if they do. I don't know if anyone recorded it.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure they did because we were doing lots of video stuff back then at the company.
yeah. We wanted to share the learnings and all that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. And then some people were like, well, I missed it. So can you just can I come to your desk? And next thing I had someone sitting at my desk with the screen up for an hour and a half present. It was just like, this is ridiculous. But I was just really excited about what I heard. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it all to you here. And here's the slides. If you have any questions, come back. Let's try something with this. I don't know. We ended up actually trying something and I helped introduce some new ways of engaging with clients. That was it was kind of like lean startup-y, but it was more like, hey, you have a problem and you have a little bit of money you want to spend, and you want to use that to find out what's a better directionality for your product next, and we're going to help
Mm-hmm.
you. And then we videotaped almost like a documentary, and that was one of the deliverables too. It was a documentary of us going to one of their potential customers, sitting on site, asking them how they use certain tools,
Mm-hmm.
making recommendations, then the team getting together and having all visual workspace where instead of designer, developer, and UX person handing things off, we had like a board where everyone would just stand around the board and be like, what did we learn this week? What did we learn in that last session? What should we build? And it went really far. And it seemed to be like everyone kind of loved working that way. And they solved problems much more quickly. And the client was happy that they didn't go down a road and find out, oh, customers actually don't need that. This is kind of more of the direction of what they need based on what you've learned. So there's complexity built into all of that, but I
Yeah.
didn't use those terms at all at that time. I kind of realized maybe I should just peel that back, and we'll do this little pilot here and let's see how that goes. And that could probably speak more.
How long after that first presentation was that realization? It sounds like it was much faster than mine.
I mean, when you see someone nearly fall asleep at your desk, or someone nearly fall asleep in that crowd that you're presenting to, you pretty much know, okay, well, I'm in too deep. And I don't have a lot of experience presenting, so I'm just going to keep going. They're going to get it all. But I think next time I'm going to try something different. And when there weren't a lot of questions.
You learned a lot faster than I did.
Sounds like her learning cycle is shorter than yours, Kyle. Is that the idea?
Much. Yeah, my arc was like, let me drag people along for a little bit. They just have to know. And I kept hearing Dave Snowden say, change the language and you'll change the behavior. Excellent. Then everybody needs to understand what epistemic justice is. And I got that same oh, he's talking again kind of response. All right.
The funny thing is I had experience speaking on short topics, but for some reason it was my bubbling over and bubbling, of excitement about this that just kind of set me off for a minute.
Though, I mean, this is a bit of a side note, but I actually think that it would be very cool because I love when I like hearing people's, I mean, I talk about an entry point into complexity or related ideas, but it's not an entry point. It's a path in. It's not a you weren't and now you are. Regardless, I like hearing people's kind of origin stories or the path that brought them to wherever they are today in this work. And on top of it, this thing we're talking about that is so common, I won't say universal, but it's so common that, you just oh, I finally have some language, or these people are talking about this stuff I've been intuiting. And, so whatever that is, there is that gushing kind of, I've seen the light and I want to share it and I'm on a mission now. And, we're on a mission from God, like the Blues Brothers, it's very... and I think that it would be really cool at some point to just compile everybody's stories about that. And we've joked about doing it with SenseMaker or something, but I almost want just a documentary, collection of just people talking, you know what I mean? But I like hearing yours because, anybody who might know you, or when we post this online and, people can look up who you are and your background, you see software, engineering, you'd imagine, and that's different than say me and Kyle and some of the folks we've had on so far, more of either a design or facilitative, or consultative. I mean, you're all those things, but you hear software and development and engineering, and you get a certain picture in your head. And
Oh yeah.
you could expect complexity to show up as just the complexity of software as a complex adaptive system and architecture as software as a, complex adaptive system.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yet we're talking about all the very same human things that I think everyone else that we engage with also talk about. So I just find that very
Definitely.
something.
Yeah, I don't know why I was kind of in tune or attuned to the human elements. I felt like I also noticed that there were, and this is before I went to that conference and learned terminology and language, but I remember, I don't know if I've told you guys the story before. Here's another story. I remember working in a large, it was like satellite TV company, and I had this new program I had to kind of manage, and I worked in the test organization, and I'll just describe the test organization was in one building, and they had, so code would be developed that would be placed installed on a set-top box, and then they would test the set-top boxes for the new version, the new upgraded, powerful solution that they had for customers, which they would hopefully sell and get installed in people's homes. And they had testers, and they sat in this area of the building, like on the first floor, I think it was, behind these cages usually. And they had rows of like kind of a lab with equipment, like different set-top boxes, all the ones out in the field that they would test when they'd get the new stuff, updates, or the new version of the box. And then there was a custom built software for reporting issues with this with the software in the set top box, custom built, and the team that built that software was sitting on the second floor. The software engineers that actually wrote the code that got the firmware, whatever, all the code onto the box, were in a completely different building, and they had a custom built development tool and kind of build into like integration tool. They didn't really do continuous integration. Some teams wanted to, but this guy had invested all this time and built this thing. And he was there, and he's like, I'm not letting anyone tear this thing down. So one day I was like looking around, like what's going on, and I kind of analyzed, okay, there's like product people over here, and there's like engineers over there, but they don't ever collaborate with the people behind the cages. And then there's the custom system up here built by these folks. They're always getting complaints of it from these people. And then the software engineers, they have to find out a way to get the stuff from that custom software into the tool that they use to actually, it was like, I basically, so I went into my manager's office and I started drawing this on the board. Okay, this building and then that building, this floor, this software system, that software system, these people kick things off but never invite those people, and there's like a kind of back and forth, and it ended up looking like a crime scene on the board. And he was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you figured all this out. And I was kind of like, and then at one point I was like, I see, isn't it the leaders of the organization's job to find things like this and smooth those things out? Like, we're not effectively positioned to, things are going slow for all these reasons, and there's so many touch points here. So that's another time where I felt like they like, just focus on the program, get it done. I'm like, yeah, get it done, but here's all the things in the way of whatever get it done means. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I can make a bunch of spreadsheets and track things and be the human order and information broker here, but is that the most effective thing to do as to boundary span this thing? That no, I think we need to bring people reconfigure how the conversations are happening to effectively deliver this software. And so that's another time where, before I had all that, where a moment I'll never forget.
What I'm hearing, we talk a lot about like what drew us in, what did we trip over. This is kind of a new take, and Jen, you framed it up with the software and the engineering that doesn't really play into this. Like, I see the world connected in an abstract kind of way, sort of poetic approach to all of this. But what I'm hearing, the arc that I'm seeing, or the sort of continuity in these stories is we're like, somebody says make good tomato sauce, and we've been given ketchup and more sugar, and that's how we've been making tomato sauce for a long time. But we just went, this is incompatible with my idea of what tomato sauce is. And so you hold your ketchup. I'm going to go find some tomatoes and see what happens. And, or maybe y'all going to go find some corn and see what happens. Like, we have to do all of the bad stuff. We have to make gross tomato sauce for a while. And we have to bore people and make them suffer through that process in some cases. That's the origin story. But eventually we find a tomato and make good sauce. And then it's like, boom, I got it.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. This what you just said threads into where I wanted to push too, because the example that you just gave, Tiani, is so, like, I would say reminiscent of things I hear from others who have very, like, the truly, like, siloed, kind of organization. And the kind of common but not always accurate identification of the silos as the problem. There's so much talk in certain parts of our world that's all silos are bad, like blah blah, like all hierarchies are bad, all, and we, like, they're not. We know from see vaguely everything that we point at in this, this YouTube and in complexity and systems oriented work. A silo into itself is not a bad thing, but can information flow? Is the system able to move? Are those couplings fluid? Are they rigid? Whatever, right? So I'm struck by what Kyle just said, kind of combined with the fact that you didn't just identify that these things were, in separate places, literally and figuratively, but the solution isn't just, have some folks make sure that these things can talk to each other. I mean, it just strikes me that this is so much more like that, that stereotyped factory model, than many of the organizations even Kyle and I talk about.
Yeah.
But what happened after you had, we don't have to talk about that story forever, but what happened after that, when you drew that diagram on the board? Like, what actually happened? Anything? Did anything change?
Nothing changed. Well, I think I helped the team get Jira. But we did get a coach, like an agile coach, come in as well. And then some, so I guess some things did change. A few teams actually, another story. A couple of teams on the software side started including different people and reconfiguring also some of the technical practices that they did where they could increase learning sooner based on what we learned in that. I was kind of the lead to kind of find a coach and learn, at that time it was like, let's learn about Agile. But the way that it ended up kind of rolling out was not this en masse like transformation, but teams experimenting with things that worked for them. So one team in particular, there was a young developer that was on the verge of getting fired. They thought he was a low performer. Well, the lead of the team, the tech lead, said, well, we're going to try pair programming and a few other things. They were kind of XP practices. Within, he said, 2 weeks, he said, it's a completely different person. Like, no, it's not a different person. You actually created a system for him to start learning, integrating what he knows with these other things he doesn't know, and building together in ways that, rather than just throwing a task over a wall and say, get it done, again, the whole get it done, you created a system that allows everyone to contribute and actually raise skills liquidity amongst the team. Yeah. And he was like, that's a revelation. He's like, I just realized that it was like how I was leading the team and how we were working together that was actually what was in the way of the young developer that I was on the verge of letting go. So for me, I was like, okay, that's enough of a story there. For something happened that helped someone, and then he went on to continue to use those skills and grow them, and everyone else on that team did. So that's one thing that happened I thought was really cool. And then the team did get one tool that allowed them to work in one place, and versus like lots of separate, they had so many different systems. They kind of like consolidated in this one area that made sense that they could have one source of truth. So yeah, a couple things happened. I guess I got some I was in the same boat actually, because I would often observe in meetings and I'm looking at things. I'm like, what's going on over there? What's that? What are they talking about? And when I went in that deep dive and figured it out and went to my manager's office and showed him all the things, he actually said to me, I actually thought you were a mediocre performer. And like, now I see you're not. And he's like, I was kind of like, I said, yeah, I tend to observe and need to have the space to then contribute and, expand on ideas. And that's kind of what you gave me by giving me the time to, you know, one, go and interview and talk with everyone, go and see, and then come back and share. That was one thing. And I said, that's kind of opened me up to lots of other collaborations from that. So that was another interesting thing, another complexity. I don't even know what that is, but is it individual narrative? Is it, I don't know. Is it not, one prevailing type of what good looks like in an organization? I don't know. Maybe. But then one day I realized, like, I was in the same boat as that young developer. Here I am, like the young engineer and project lead here that had a similar situation. Something happened that everyone can say, oh wait, you have all these skills and know-how and perspectives that weren't being leveraged before. So yeah.
Well, right
I
there,
would.
it's such a good, like, sorry, Kyle, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
No, go.
It's just such a good articulation or visualization of, so the result of this story wasn't like some big training on complexity happened and suddenly everybody had raised their complexity consciousness and everything was great. It was small things that were very specific to this org, and they weren't universal and they didn't all like make everything better. But at least in this case, I hear some of this around that the organization got better at learning, and that showed up in some places as individual interactions, the mutual learning and pair programming, or the way that an organization understood how maybe it could better leverage its individuals and the network of information that flows between them.
Mm-hmm.
But also as a group, as a team, as some of the things you mentioned earlier in the previous part of the example.
Yeah.
And so that's
And some of those
that is
improvements were
critical.
local,
but
they were still
right,
improvements.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this I've been listening to a lot of Bayo Akomolafe lately, and he has been talking about fugitivity. And I think that's where this plays in. This is such a great story of that, where it was the opposite of you going in and saying, here's the brain dump in over 90 minutes. I'm going to tell you all the things I learned. And it was instead, you just did a thing, and people around you had their own aha. They connected their own dots of, my definition of this space is incompatible with the space itself. The way that the way that I'm defining these edges are now broken. And
Yeah.
so now I have to reinterrogate things. And that sort of homogeneous idea of what a performer is or isn't, suddenly like there's plurality in the conversation now.
Yeah.
And that made everybody sort of step back a little bit. And I love how that comes together, like how important that is in what we do on a day-to-day basis, hopefully on a day-to-day basis, what we intend to do on a day-to-day basis. But the opposite of that instinct to just let me go inform and change the language and install and all of that. Instead, it was just, here's the mess that I made on the whiteboard. Just thinking, and that was the moment of, oh shit, look at all this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Funny thing is, he actually had already entered my performance evaluation. He went and like rolled it back in the system. I was like, thank you very much. So
Can we stop and talk about that for a second, though? Between you and the other young developer you mentioned, it isn't just like the human interest story of young person who, or not even young in some cases, could be anybody, but like person who is assumed to be A turns out to be B, or, somebody is better enabled to like flourish, and that's always a triumph. Like, forget that part of the story. From even like a revenue and like business value, you're going to get more dollar value out of the human capital, blah, 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 the resources that are people. And it's just, I just like to our dear listeners, think about you having been in that role, I'm sure, at some point in your career, and then B, think about the ways in which you enact some of these kind of decisions in your org, and where you can or could potentially be but don't realize, better activate the folks like the two in these stories, because so much of that I find people do want to just, oh well, that's fine, but like if this person's not actually performing, I'm getting rid of them. But like, I wouldn't say universally every single person can be a high performer, because that's the nature of defining performance the way that we do. But that's a good conversation for another time, right, Kyle?
Oh yeah, that is a good
But I
one.
just really,
But on
I do
board.
like that you mentioned
Like
this in two
performance.
different ways in this small piece of an anecdote, because that is a big part of what I think enabling a complexity oriented practice can help do, is make it possible for some things to be possible that aren't possible if you don't. Wow, that was the most inarticulate thing I've ever said in my life. You get
Yeah,
me though.
creating conditions, tilling the
Right.
soil, whatever you want to grow your
Yeah.
tomatoes for the sauce.
Yes.
Not
Love
the
it.
corn, but the tomatoes.
No, corn won't work.
Yeah.
So, where do you see that showing up in your work today?
Well, over time, I started. It was a talk that I heard Kevin Bear give on. I don't remember who he was talking to, and I saw a link. Might have been on LinkedIn. I watched the talk, and I was like, oh, I got to go read that white paper on the evolution of sociotechnical systems. And so then from there, it was kind of like, okay, complexity as theory is very interesting, and then you get into like more of like the philosophical or like the deep terminology and all of that. But then, okay, what is nature? What is an organization and the nature of a socio-technical organization? Just because I work in organizations that are doing something, usually making something, it could be very like high cyber environment or low cyber, and or somewhere in between cyber physical. um, and so the materiality of the work, the all the aspects of a socio-technical system, as I remember as it was defined in that white paper, which was like the whole organization, the value, the primary value, uh, the primary work system or work stream, I think they call it, and then the macro social phenomena. And the
Mm-hmm.
macro social phenomena are sometimes things that exist that enable work. That when you strip them away, sometimes work breaks, and you're like, "Why did it work?" Oh wait, because these were all, in the example of in the paper, people that worked in the same town in
Mm-hmm.
Scotland, where they were neighbors. There's a whole
Mm-hmm.
community, and they went to the mines every day, and there was some like social aspect of that that allowed them to work together, trust each other, and communicate in certain ways. That was one of the examples. So, but the analysis of a system, all those factors are up for grabs or part of the analysis. The languages, the different cultures, the materiality of the work, what they're actually building, who they're building it for, what the legal entity is as a whole. Like all of that is how you understand and think of all the intricacies and the things that can emerge over time that you would never be able to predict. Um, so that's kind of what shows up in my work in terms of problem solving and the types of questions that might be asked in some kind of facilitated experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, One example just came up in the past week where um, uh, this team it had a leadership change, and someone wants to kind of get all the main players on the team together to talk about what their assumptions are. And so I looked at kind of where she started, and I said, if you just say what are our assumptions in kind of a flat, non-contextual way, it may be hard to anchor in or get some valuable feedback, because a lot of times people don't know what to say or know what to contribute or feedback unless you give them a prompt a um, or a probe or a question, or even, hey, in terms of this area of the technology, what are we seeing? And then they can say, well, I
Mm-hmm.
assumed this was happening, but I noticed someone over here did this, and I'm really annoyed that that happened over here. And then you can get everyone in the room and say, well, I did that over there. That's different than what you expected because this is the assumption I was holding. And then now we're like having a conversation about, oh, we were all in the room and heard the same information at some point, but interpreted it differently. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of one of the things that, like, the things that show up in the work now is this idea of, interpretation gap and what it means to do boundary spanning in an organization, and why like information brokerage is not always the most effective way, just because, like, hey, oh, you told me this, let me write it down. Okay, guys, they said that. No, like, how do we actually bring people together to solve problems? Not
Yeah.
all, sometimes they're people that don't need to be brought together to solve problems, sometimes they do. But knowing and
Right.
thinking about that, what are the right moves to make our way through a muddy or nebulous or confusing situation to enable, getting things done. So it's
Yeah.
not just like, like crack the whip, but actually, wait, we have to change some of the conversations here. Or,
Yeah.
and changing the conversation is not like telling people to talk differently, but facilitating, creating
Yeah.
conditions for something else, some other
Yeah.
kind of conversation to come up, a more effective, or um, sharing knowledge and bridging conversation. And that reminds me
Yeah.
of like Dr. Westrom's typology, which I use all the time because it's just like, it's simple but gives you a picture. So if you have like a pathological organization and they focus on power is the center, and bridging is actually actively discouraged. And you have a
Mm-hmm.
bureaucratic organization where bridging's tolerated, but it becomes annoying. It's like, just follow the rules. Like, everything's about the rules. Follow the rules. We have a checklist of rules. There's a big rule
Yep.
book. And then if you have
Yep.
like more performance centered or generative organization, that, okay, here's where we're trying to go. Let's work together because we got to solve this problem. And bridging is actively encouraged, and where it's needed, and where you can go seek out knowledge that you need, and the mission is the center versus like who's in power and all of that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the thing I always comes to mind when I'm thinking about where I'm, can we bring a little mission centered language or a container that focuses everyone back to a mission and how we share responsibility to get that mission
Yeah.
accomplished. Something like
Yeah.
that is what I keep in mind a lot.
You know what I'm hearing too that I think is really good to highlight? Well, A, I'm glad you took it to socio-technical systems because we were going to ask you about that anyway, because that's one of your areas of expertise. And so we absolutely wanted to hear about it. And B, I think probably our listeners, some folks are like, what is that? I have no idea. Look it up. It's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. But some people are like, okay, she's speaking my language. And I think it's good to hear you describe it the way that you're describing the thinking in this way, because it's highlighting that it's about practices, right? Not just structures. So, I mean, kind of
Oh
like we
yeah.
said earlier, solution isn't going to be necessarily the structure. That can be part of it, like the material structure or the organizational structure or whatever. But there are reasons we keep teams in protected silos or containers sometimes because there's benefit to that. But it isn't just structures, breaking them, creating them. It's the practices. And the practices, and that's a broad umbrella word here, the way I'm using it, um, I just think are so rich and so often overlooked. We hear, those of us in the complexity world hear all the time about how it's interactions. It's not, it's all in the interactions. You change and modulate interactions, not just physical things and whatever process, workflow, that kind of thing. But anyway, long story short, I just wanted to pause and highlight that. I'm curious to hear if there's more you want to say about it, because I think for
Yeah, yeah,
folks
yeah.
listening, new to the concept or the field or the thinking in STS, it's about a lot more
Yeah.
than practices. Contrasting practice with structure.
There's so much there. Um, in my
Have at
talk,
it.
one of the talks or keynotes I give, I talk about how organizations exhibit certain kinds. You'll see certain kinds of common patterns, and the practices kind of underpin and reinforce some of those patterns. So, if you have a very command and control organization, you're probably going to see lots of monitoring and controlling behavior, and the things that continually monitor and control, old school project management has monitoring and controlling like practically in the PMBOK. So you'll see that those practices that are more about data collection focus, monitoring, reporting on everything, those kinds of things, and anything that has like hard control. Versus if you have an organization with a little bit more guiding and enabling behavior, you're going to see practices that they have less that's in the, if you're into Kinevin, in the obvious, formerly known as simple category, but you see our bucket, you because it's not a categorization, but it's you'll recognize them less as simple, obvious, a little bit more like, here's the right expertise you need to get the thing done, and here's some heuristics, but you need to kind of like make your way through in this other area because it's more complex, therefore we need to test ideas and probe. So that's the kind of, there's practices that underpin the behavior that you actually see in the patterns that you see. So if you have a certain like set of patterns and behaviors that, or a set of behaviors you would like to promote, the practices are really, can then be very important, because there are certain things that will just by their nature and by their design and how they were created and how they're used are antithetical to the directionality that you want. So there's that, and there's something else you said that it'll come back. That was the first one. Oh, and then some practices are done socially. Many practices are done socially. So you're the practice you can't really take the interaction and the practice apart at that point, because it's like it's all. If you go with like social practice theory, it's the integration of meaning and purpose, the materialities of like the and tools, and the its meaning, purpose, and the know-how. So what defines, like, what's the know-how of what that thing is? So if those three areas together make up a practice, and we do some of these socially, therefore it is automatically complex, or can be. There's complicated elements, there's complex elements, but the interaction part of it is where the complexity lies. So those are the two things that stand out from that, is that you can't really take them apart. They belong together, as well as the tooling, the practice, the interactions, all of those things together. They exist together, and all can and should be part of the conversation. And you don't have to change everything all at once, but you might have interventions to move a system in a different or a team, or it's not like a point. It's like a set of things that you will try and iterate on. Yeah. And it's not like this like point thing, I'm going to go here and tweak and like I'm going to play with a couple levers and try and thing and see if that gets us, like, kind of interrupts a thing that's not quite at a balance, that's out of balance, and we want it to go in a different direction. So
yeah. I can hear all of my old agile delivery leads and product owners. I've had similar conversations, and the question at the end is always, okay, how do I measure this? How do I put it into a dashboard? Where does this fit into our Jira? How do we know? How do we measure progress through this? And my initial response is usually, have you listened to a word that I've said? But I'm wondering, do you face that same sort of thing, or are you just handed the keys and run?
Yeah, I do face that. How do we know what is progress? What does good look like? I mean, that's a whole other topic, like, too. I have one project I actually worked on with Jabe and another teammate, Michael Woodley, a few years back, was Michael and I were in the CTO office at a large company, and asked to improve how delivery was done in programs. And these are large cyber physical, like usually aircraft engine. And the prevailing narrative, or I heard whispers of, oh, it's agile, safe everywhere. Like, just we'll unbox it and we'll be good. Let's just start there. And Michael and I looked at each other and we're like, no, it's not going to work. So we started thinking, like, how can we interrupt that pattern? Like, what could we do, or what could be, where could we start? And we did a couple months of, like, first just like getting the lay of the land in the organization and finding out where there were pockets in context of teams doing things very differently, because that could go really far in sharing what the art of the possible would be. So we saw a team in Germany that had an agile coach, but the agile coach was like, I'm not here talking about Scrum. I'm just helping them think through their delivery and think how they can increase learning more sooner. And the head of that whole department, he wasn't in the lower details. He trusted everyone. It was all his first goal was like, how do we get product into customers' hands sooner so we can win more bids? It was like singular focus. They did that. They got through some bureaucracy that had been put in place and came up with it. They had to negotiate with a team that kind of like an oversight team, and said, if we do this instead, we can get product in customers' hands sooner, but but we think this would also satisfy these requirements that are coming from this oversight. And they said, yeah, do that and share back with us. So like, okay, great. That allowed them to get early product, like, early meat locker kind of thing, or drink machine in a train station for them to see, or somewhere to test, oh, the hinges are great for our application. And so, but it was still too expensive. So they didn't win all the bids because they're like, your product was superior every time, we love it, but now it's expensive. So he's like, okay, how do I lower the price? And it was all about, then it was like modularity, less customization, lowering customization down to like small things, but have like a, more modular, like, set of parts that kind of work for, like, 70 to 80% of the things, that kind of thing. If we do that, that's going to lower the cost. So that's what they were doing. And I was like, oh, that's great. Like, that's the kind of thing. He was like focused on, they had some data. They knew how long it took. They knew how long it took to get product in customers' hands to start with. Then they knew how quickly they were able to get product in customers' hands. Now they had a comparison about, okay, the pricing. And now they had an idea, okay, like, here's an experiment we can run and some expertise we can bring in to, now here's one thing, we've got like all these parts, custom machining and all this stuff. That's very expensive. Okay, now what's the next step? So it was, and the reason why I went into that long thing was, it was about, what's the outcome you're trying to achieve? What are the decisions that you need to make along the way to that outcome? What are the insights or information that help you make decisions? Therefore, what is your metric or measure? That's like a whole metrics design activity that people skip. They go to the watermelon or the bowler charts, the red, green, yellow, off track, on track, at risk. It's like, what's actually broken in your, like, why, and how come everything's red all the time? So getting insight to make decisions about what to do in the organization, what to untangle, where are things out of balance, what things aren't working. And those things are sociotechnical problems. They're a combination of tooling, interactions, materials, skill, all of that. Like, you may have a few different things you have to go and like try and like play with for an intervention and say, oh, now it's moving. So like, you could probably pick out flavors of all of that in the interventions that this leader did in Germany to get things into the customer's hands. He had to go talk to this like oversight team. Yet the team had to get certain training about how that they could like visualize their work better, and how that they could communicate along the way, and then how they could build things in a like good enough state to get to the customer. Because this is not like high fidelity, it's gonna go into the train station in Berlin kind of thing. All of that is materials, skills, know-how, interactions, communication, negotiation, learning new knowledge. Like, all of that is involved in that what seemingly small move but has big impact. So our whole initiative was, how do we train, or how do we go into a large program? Let's start with a tag team that can pull the data, because they were data rich and information poor. Let's understand what's the game the leaders and the teams are playing along their way to engine development. What information helps them, reduce engine production time from 5 years down to like, I don't know, whatever the goal is, any improvement, 5 to 4, 4 to 3, whatever. And therefore, what might be some different types of indicators and measures, and then that leads them into the potential interventions once they see, oh, this is out of balance over here. So that was the whole thing, a metrics coaching and pulling the data, but feeding it back into the right information they need to support their decisions. So that's a long answer for your question, but that's what I run into.
We're gonna clip the hell out of that portion there, because that is probably one of the best, most articulate ways to answer the how do I measure it? You know, I drank the complexity Kool-Aid, but how do we know if we're not allowed to be goal or outcomes driven anymore, and outcomes are emergent, and how do I know if I'm on the right track? Is this really tough thing to answer? It has answers. You can do it. We're not saying that you just close your eyes and fire the arrow and hope for the best, but it's so hard to articulate it, and you just nailed it.
Well, it's evolving. That's the point, is that your measures also evolve. I think another white paper, it was Agile based patterns in the Agile canon. I found this white paper. Daniel Greening wrote it, I think. Yeah, that's who wrote it. And he said, he gave 5 patterns. Like he said, an Agile organization, forget all these like labeled practices or what they call frameworks, Scrum, whatever. He said there's 5 base patterns for an organization that is moving with agility and resiliency and all that stuff. So if I can remember them, I always forget one. But it was limiting work in process, solving systemic issues, measure economic progress was one of them, and embrace collective responsibility. I forgot the 5th, obviously. I don't know if that was 5th, but like measure economic progress. In that whole section, he says, have a balanced, evolving suite of measures. So you're measuring something now because you're trying to change, you need insight to make decisions. You make those decisions, you make some improvement and then new things pop up. Okay, what are we paying attention to now? So again, it's not a set it and forget it thing. And it does take a little bit of work to figure out what those things are. And maybe there's things you have that you can just weed out, and these are like the 4 few things. Another thing that was important was this idea of destructive pairs. So pairing certain things together. So if you game or overdrive on one, it'll expose the gaming or reduce the effect of it. And that whole insight measure thing I said before, that is Larry, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Mascherone, the Odom. You can go and Google that too if you're interested. But we created a workshop around that, like how to help people create that evolving suite of measures and pair certain measures together so that they have really good information for the decision making.
You know what is I'm struck by in this conversation? I mean, and of course, listeners know, like, we're all friends here, so we've had chats before, but just listening with kind of the mindset of another listener, thinking about other people who might hear this, or people I'm going to want to share this with, like shoved down their throat. It strikes me that so much insight does exist in Agile, Lean, Safe, all of these sort of like framework, like adjacent kind of communities. And a lot of the people that, like, for example, Kyle and I bump into, I would say, not across the board, but more often than not, that is not their world. And so they struggle with some of these challenges, like we just said. How do you measure success, right? Those folks may not know to go looking, or even if they would or they did, they don't know the language, or they're intimidated. And plus, most people have this notion of, I mean, we'll leave Agile and Agile history for another time, but is complexity and complexity-oriented practice what Agile was meant to be? And whatever, is Agile dead? We're not going there. But there's so much about this. If I vaguely point at the map that just says like Agile, for people who aren't in software or dev or any kind of that practice, it might as well say there be dragons. And there's so much there. Like, how many white paper slash ideas slash thinkers did you just rattle off in the last 20 minutes that I think someone who has never touched code or had a hand in designing any kind of technology in their lives would still find incredibly insightful. So it's just, this conversation is just definitely kind of for me highlighting that we talk a big game about cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary,
Yeah.
post-disciplinary. I still think we as a collective, we've got some room to grow as far as where we look
Yeah.
for answers and patterns that we could be borrowing and experimenting with outside of our domain. Because I know a lot of people who hear what you say and they're going to go, holy crap. And they're going to go, I don't know anybody. I don't talk to the devs in my company. I don't do any of this stuff. I've never encountered any of the stuff that she's on about, but I really want to get into it. And you don't have to be an engineer. You can get to it. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the whole evolution of sociotechnical systems was written, what, in the 30s maybe? Or the research started in the 30s from the Tavistock Institute. So when I found that paper, they were talking about mines.
Mm-hmm.
Mines? Coal mines?
You were like, I'm not a miner. Right?
Kind of mine, yeah, like mines in Scotland. And then they did research and continued all the way, and they ended somewhere in the 80s, 90s, like IT, where IT is kind of, so most of what they researched had nothing to do with, like, what here we are in 2026 in
Yeah.
software, none of it. And if I remember correctly, Jay once said, well, we were working together at that organization, most of the teams we were working with was like what we would call like low cyber. So they were mechanical and system engineers, and like agiles for software. Like all these concepts came from like you guys from back in the day. Then I coached a team of rocket scientists in the research center, and one of the, like 30-year veteran rocket science, right, like PhD, like super smart. He sat across the table. He's asking me questions, and then one day he goes, "Tiani, this is how we used to work 20 years ago. This is how we worked. We would like, get in the room. They'd give us a problem. We would start jamming on the problem together. Like, where did all the red tape came from? All these like spreadsheets and I was like, yes." So like, and what they were doing had no software. It was like an engine fan assembly, blade assembly. It was just that fan that you see on the plane in the housing, out of a new material. They had to hook it up to things and with electronics and all that, but it itself was a physical part in the system that we call an engine, aircraft engine. So, and if I remember rightly, Jabe mentioned that all those folks, the mystery guys that went to this meeting in Snowbird and signed this Agile manifesto, and then now we have all those things that we hear about, like you said, Jen, had gone to some conference where Trist from the Tavistock Institute spoke about his research about sociotechnical systems all the way back to the mines. So it was more about learning distributed authority, distributed control, problem solving in the organization with those closest to the problems. So whatever you're making, whatever you're doing, something like that. Go into use like Alicia's talk around like the first one about context dependent and independent constraints. Changing constraints. Very few things that are context independent. More things that are context dependent. That enables innovation. These are concepts that it doesn't matter what you're doing, what you're building.
Right.
So looking for that kind of knowledge that talks about these concepts and how they've showed up in an industry maybe like you are in is a good start. And there are examples out there. So
yeah. Oh my God. I am just like,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot here and we're barely getting started, and I know we're going to run out of time in like 10, 15 minutes anyway, but I really appreciate, especially the way that you're making this point too about, there's this notion that I just always like thinking about, which is that so much of learning is actually relearning or remembering, right? I'm on like a big scale, on a Jen get philosophical scale, right? Like,
yes,
so much of learning is actually remembering things that have been forgotten intentionally or otherwise. And a big part of learning is also forgetting, right? And unlearning. And so it's just that concept. And I feel like so many folks who find this intellectual community and they're hungry for more. And I think some folks who don't have a technical background they don't necessarily know that it's worth being a little brave, because you do have the ability. You
Yeah.
will see that these things have parallel structure. You will see that they rhyme. You don't have to speak the language of engineering or any of the kind of very
Mhm.
jargony system science, from the early part of last century. But there are, I
Mhm.
don't know, there's a lot there to be found. If you go mining, you will find things. Anyway, sorry, go ahead,
Mining,
Kyle.
yeah. Well,
I was gonna say,
the
so
reason why I was like almost cracking up there for a second was because you reminded me of when I was younger. My dad used to tell me, "I've forgotten more than you even learned and ever will," and it just reminded me of that.
mhm.
So anyway, go ahead, Kyle.
I,
Sorry.
when we say field notes, this is exactly what I think we're talking about. These stories, this is so great.
Yeah.
What I'm also hearing in the learning and in these stories is, and we kind of started this way about going perpendicular with people and just introducing a whole bunch of stuff. I think Jen and I, we've kind of circled around this a little bit, but I don't think we've highlighted it enough. And I think you're doing a great job with these stories, highlighting this component where we're very much swimming with the current. You went in and you're saying, okay, we're all engineers here, and we can both agree on this deficiency in our structure.
Yeah.
So let's experiment with something new. And it's not a full, we're going to tear the building to the ground sort of approach. It's not
Yeah.
I need to teach you, you need to relearn. But it's, we're meeting in our journeys together in this space that has a gap. And let's
Yeah.
play with that for
Exactly.
a moment.
Yep.
And
Exactly
that's
right.
huge. I
Yeah.
found this with UX researchers also when I wanted to start talking about narrative inquiry, and I'm going in and I'm saying we bias it through our own synthesis, and they're like, yes, that's a problem that nobody's been able to figure out. Excellent. I've got a new thing we can try. And they were so open to it, and it was wonderful. But this is exactly what I'm hearing you talk about, and I love it. So I wanted to ask, kind of divert a little bit. You've been involved in the Complexity Lounge for the last couple of years now.
Yeah.
As a host, facilitator. If anyone doesn't know Complexity Lounge, find it. It's on Meetup, and they do amazing sessions monthly. And but I'm wondering what has changed for you, or how are you seeing anything differently or reapproaching things with since with that experience of getting involved with hosting that?
Um, Definitely, it's expanded my views, not views, my horizon and interests beyond things that I had never really studied and considered before. Especially when we have people with a background in philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
because I had never really studied much philosophy, or some of the schools of thought around existence and being and humans and thinking and all of that. And it just kind of is. There's a website I used to go to all the time, like How Stuff Works.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like
Love
that's
it.
like, for me, sometimes some of the things I learn is like the complexity version of that,
Mm-hmm.
or at least people's interpretation of how stuff works, because we learn a little bit of science about, ecosystems and cells, how they, you could draw, comparisons there, or the brain, think, humans, how we relate, the unseen things about how we relate, or our intelligence. Like, that was one of the things that came up in the recent AI rant. It's like
Mm-hmm.
what human intelligence is, different ways of expressing what that is, but this idea that there's, smell, pheromone, it's not text on a page. There's like so many things that we can. This is human intelligence, or like things that factor
Mm-hmm.
into it. So
Yeah.
I like to sit and think about things like that, and so it's just expanded my horizons in terms of examples I can give in work, but also just for enjoyment and just
Mm-hmm.
growing in
Yeah.
knowledge, expanding my knowledge. And from that standpoint, I think that's been a big thing for me. Probably a little bit of confidence has grown the more but that's probably just from like experience and studying interfacing with other people and seeing that they've gone through some similar either work scenarios, life scenarios, realizations about complexity. That's also good. Just having, that kind of thing where you you get sharpened from the experience of others and hearing theirs as well.
Oh yeah.
But that can also give you a little bit like, oh, that's not so bad what I've got going on here. It's not so bad. It's actually
validation.
Okay.
Sure.
And they noticed the same things that I did. And maybe there was something in the system, and with complexity is why I was having a tough time at this particular, because I do have like a lot of like work stories. I had started this like, had a joke with a friend that I was going to make a book because he said that whenever I was looking for a new job, I sounded like a womanizer. And so he called it a jobizer. And so he called it like this thing called, because let me go see what this company's got over here kind of thing. Like, let me go over here. Let's go.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
okay.
I had a similar joke that, I talked a lot of times when I would. Yeah, I know we're a little bit laggy here. Hopefully this will come out right. But like the idea that, you're window shopping or flirting with other jobs or like work Tinder, I think was a joke that came up at one point. But it isn't just to think about other roles for yourself in the future. It's also doing that kind of comparative, thing. So she can't hear us all that well. It's okay. This will hopefully work itself out in the wash.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was like, I could see you guys going kind of like wavy too. So I was like, the audio is synced for me now. Hopefully you can hear me.
Okay, excellent. Can hear you just fine.
And so I was trying to answer your last question, and then I started rambling, and then the video distracted me.
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
We're good. Okay, we did it. We're back.
All right.
A, do you want to finish any of the other thoughts where things got cut off? Or B, since we're getting close to time, is there anything else you want to share? Or anything you want to have any last words on?
No, just that this was great conversation, and looking forward to more, because we see each other in different places. So looking forward to more of that conversation in collab on these topics. Yeah. And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you for joining us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, then I won't push our luck anymore with the video connection. So we'll call it a wrap.
We're adapting. Yeah.
Sounds good.